Welcome everyone to this Building Better Business webinar. We're going to be talking about hiring veterans. I'm going to give it another minute and see if anyone else wants to join us, but I'm Kristen Johnson. I'm the new Director of Communications here at Better Business Bureau serving Connecticut. Okay, well, I don't want to make everyone wait too long, so we will get started. Veterans can help raise a company's workforce to the next level in many ways, including leadership and teamwork. In fact, 80% of HR professionals say veterans are uniquely trained to work in these chaotic times. Today, Sterling Cochran, the president of human resources management company Chateau Rouge Incorporated, is going to talk about the many reasons to hire members of our military community. Chateau Rouge is an accredited business that specializes in, among other things, hiring veterans. And by the end of today's webinar, we hope you gain a better understanding of how veterans can not only fit on your team, but enhance your business's operations. Sterling, take it away.
Thank you. So she said, my name is Sterling Cochran. I'm the president of Chateau Rouge. I'm also a veterans ambassador through the SHRM Foundation. It's the SHRM Foundation has started up in partnership with USAA in order to kind of bring in some of these other aspects to the HR world and to hiring the parties such as veterans. So some of the areas that are going to be focused on will be the understanding the barriers that the military and their spouses kind of face, as well as trends within military, veteran, and spouse employment. We'll also focus on military connected employees, as well as the hiring military veterans and their spouses overall. And finally, we'll look at some of the best practices you can use for sustaining military hiring programs across the employment life cycle. So this module will have 4 primary objectives, which will be understanding employment barriers, challenges, and assets veterans and the military spouses bring to the workforce, to being familiar with employment trends, including the overall employment situation for veterans and military spouses, and understanding what business case is and why it's important to articulate a business case for your military hiring program, and have an understanding of the best practices that can be utilized across the employee life cycle when developing a military hiring program. So we'll get started by talking about some of the challenges and barriers the military community face with regards to employment. While it's important to understand these challenges, we emphasize how many strengths they bring to the workplace. So this training is about developing military culture competence, having an awareness of the unique employment challenges members of the military community face, the strengths they can bring to the workplace, the business case for hiring them, and how you can help as a human resource professional, to include also just as a small business, just as a employer in general. There are many specific strategies you can use, which we'll discuss throughout the module, but it's important to remember that all involved using good HR practices, just like you would use for any other employee. They are different, but they are not that different overall. So these include the promoting inclusive policies and practices, communicating the desire to be inclusive and welcoming, using unique strategies that apply directly to veterans and military spouses when needed, and utilizing existing resources such as an existing employee resource group or an employee assistance program to help with a unique workplace challenges. So why does employing veterans and military spouse matter? Well, as you know, that veterans are a valuable member of the workforce. They're highly educated. Employers say that they demonstrate a high level of workplace performance, and there is some evidence they stay in their jobs once they are settled in a post-transition role. And all these factors matter to employers because 4 out of 5 employers report difficulties filling jobs due to the lack of available talent. And veterans as well as military spouses can help meet this need. This is why HR professionals are reporting that veterans recruiting is at the top 3 priorities that they have. As we see, 65% of veterans, hold college education or higher. 68%, make them much better than their civilian peers, and 57% stay in their jobs longer, which is quite important overall. And as long as they feel welcomed, then we have this goal of maintaining that employment. On the other hand, although veterans have many in-demand skills, they face employment challenges. For example, why do more than 65% of veterans leave their first job post-separation within 2 years? It's important for veterans to understand the position for which they're applying and overall company's culture. Understanding the position requirements with the company's culture in mind will help them leverage their individual talents within the workplace. Employers' investment in a strong and effective military hiring practice starts with an ensuring adequate resources are dedicated to including human resources professionals and leaders throughout the process. And so the goal is who will champion the military hiring as part of their culture. So the SHRM Foundation believes that veterans are valuable members of the workforce, and this initiative will help HR professionals attract, hire, and retain members of the community for this reason. The SHRM Foundation launched its Veteran Employment Initiative in 2017, and the SHRM Foundation's Veteran Employment Initiative aligns with the HR community's commitment to building the best workforce possible with some of the best talent available. And just for normal, leaders as well as human resources professionals, they have the Veterans at Work certification, where you can dive deeper and get a better understanding of what the statistics are when it comes to this veteran hiring and military spouse hiring. So some of the challenges that veterans could face is finding employment that's a good fit, finding employment in a new career field while continuing to utilize the skills they learned in the military. For myself personally, I was a cook in the military, and I went to school after the military and received a professional certificate from a really accredited culinary school. And then I went into the business mindset and focused on the employee relations and labor relations, and have worked up and currently working on my master's in human resources management. So, I started as just a cook, and now I've grown much further than just where I started. But I used a lot of those skill sets that I had when I was in the military to have that understanding and dedication to what I do. And so with that, that's finding the work that is meaningful. Like I said, that was, for me, it was human resources and labor relations and employee relations. There's also translating military experience into civilian terms on a resume. That's a very difficult place currently for our veterans, as the civilian workforce and the Department of Defense workforce haven't really found a way to marry the two languages. We are seeing quite a change, but it's still a little bit of a rocky road to go. So navigating the civilian workforce, preparing for transition process, and navigating physical disabilities or invisible wounds, such as traumatic brain injuries, PTSD. And one thing worth noting is that while some veterans do struggle with disability, it's important to remember that many civilians also struggle with disabilities too. Human resources perspectives, you would utilize the same types of support and procedures you would use for any other type of employees needing disability. And the veterans as well as normal employees, they with pre-existing conditions, they fall under the Americans with Disabilities Act. And that's something that definitely management as well as human resources should fully be aware of due to the importance of that. And there's a resource called askjan.org where human resources and employees or leadership can go in and really get an understanding about how they can help each other when it comes to accommodations and just disabilities in general. A lot of people say HIPAA, but it's actually more so focused on the ADA side. Okay, so veterans face one set of employment challenges, especially at the point when they are transitioning from military. But military spouses also face their own unique challenges. And this is particularly because military spouses often seek employment at the same time their spouse is a service member, and they must balance the relocations, the work-life balances, the deployed spouse, periods of unemployment when, if they change from like up in Connecticut and go down to Virginia, that's changing up their whole life. And before these last couple of years, for veteran spouses, maintaining employment in a virtual status wasn't necessarily a thing for many. So they'd have to upright leave and couldn't get much employment development around. So for those who are employed, 58% work for the private sector companies. HR professionals can be instrumental in making sure they have a chance to compete for employment. Okay, so veteran and military spouses have different challenges, but they bring some of the same soft skills to the workplace. For example, employers continue to place high value on the core competencies veterans honed during their military services. Likewise, military spouses may develop valuable skills like resistance, the ability to tolerate ambiguity, and perseverance as they result of their affiliation with the military. These skills are a way of life for veterans and military spouses and serve as values, as you see here. Work ethic, teamwork, even as far as being on time or early for work. These are aspects that we want in employees, but the military really hones in on those in a way of life for the members, because the military isn't a job, it's a way of life for these people. And it doesn't matter if they're in 4 years or they're 20 years, the skills are honed and they just keep getting sharper. All right, now that we've established why veterans and military spouses make great employees, let's talk about some of the trends that are influencing veterans and military hiring. So a few of the trends that continue to impact veteran and military spouse employment. Keep in mind that since 2001, over 3 million veterans have joined the civilian workforce. Service members continue to transition from military each year, and most of them are working age. Veterans often say their biggest transition to employment is one of the biggest challenges they face when leaving the military. So recognizing the challenges veterans face with regards to employment has led the public, private, and nonprofit sectors to work together and make many partnerships that have been developed as a result, including the Veterans Job Mission, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, Foundation's hiring of our Heroes program, and a host of others, to include even this webinar today with the Better Business Bureau. While many of these efforts have been quite successful in impacting the unemployment rate for veterans, the employment rate for military spouses has remained relatively unchanged. On a positive note, there has been a greater recognition of the impacts of military service on families, and a number of effects have formed to try to impact the problem of spouse employment. This has also included greater emphasis on military caregivers and veterans with disabilities. Some other significant trends mirror broader workplace trends, such as the future of work, an acceleration of remote work, and an emphasis on diversity, equity, and inclusion. With equity, with diversity, equity, and inclusion, that can also fall into some of the EEO practices. And if you're a government contractor, at least at the federal level, you have to follow a lot of the EEO requirements, and just hiring veterans is a large part of that initiative. So as an example, even though the veteran population is smaller than in recent years, it is more diverse than ever before. Women veterans, for example, are the fastest growing subpopulation according to the VA. Total population of women veterans, for example, is expected to increase at a rate of 18,000 women per year for the next 10 years. The post 9/11 veteran population is a large component of the veteran population currently, with 20% of veterans having served after 9/11. They have high levels of education, are more likely to have service-connected disabilities, are more likely to experience combat, and many are likely to have experienced underemployment despite the fact that veteran employment rates had improved dramatically prior to COVID-19. And part of the things that I want you guys to not dwell too much on is when it says a service-connected disability. A lot of times we see disability as a negative part, but if we look at companies such as Google, Facebook, even Microsoft, Apple, they created these environments. We've all seen it with the pool tables, ping pong tables, the lounge areas, and these are all part of what brought morale and gave peace of mind to their workplace. But that isn't a surefire way. That was their way. That was based on their surveys of employment. And they have a different population than most people. So when you think of service-connected disability, you could have even something as small as just a massage therapist come in once a week, a relaxation room, as I've seen in some of the co-work spaces where they have a phone booth. That way, if someone's on the phone, it's not causing a commotion. There's all kinds of ways that can really change the way we think about these benefits that can also benefit those that have a service-connected disability. While the unemployment numbers are constantly changing and veterans unemployment has suffered during COVID-19, it is important to understand where we've been and where we want to go. As you can see, the veteran employment has improved over time after peaking during the Great Recession in 2011, when many of the significant employment-focused efforts began. Many of the initiatives that have been implemented over the past decade appear to have influenced the employment rates of veterans, which is one reason it's encouraging that you have chosen to participate in this particular training, because we believe that your efforts as professionals and leadership within your companies can have a substantial impact on hiring veterans and their spouses. While veterans have seen a decline in their employment rates across the past decade, military spouses, as we talked about, are still relatively high in unemployment. In fact, military spouses have an unemployment rate that is roughly 3 times that of their civilian peers, despite the number of efforts in recent years focused on military hiring military spouses. And one of the things that I think that can really stem from is in relation to the fact that most tours of duty for a military member is 3 years. So if they pick up their family and move every 3 years, 2 years, 4 years, so on, you're not getting a chance to really build any type of long-term employment. And I think that's really something that needs to be looked past when really looking over resumes of military spouses. All right, so now we're going to talk about some of the barriers and challenges faced by veterans and military spouses, as well as some of their strengths. All right, so some common veteran challenges, including transitioning military experience, finding the right job match, obtaining education and credentials, identifying the right job opportunities, service-connected disabilities, stereotypes and stigma. And some of the more common military spouse challenges include frequent relocations, resume gaps, license transferability, which we've seen a lot of that being changed recently. So that's kind of down on the lower end of the scale now, but it still can be a major impact, such as if a spouse is a lawyer and then trying to change location, they still have to pass the bar for their state. Access and cost of childcare, unemployment and underemployment, the parenting responsibilities, earnings, and a lack of job portability. And the parenting responsibilities is something that I've tried to express to many employers is, it's not, the parenting responsibilities are not that of someone who has it has been a single parent their whole life, or for a majority of it, or just newly single parent. You're a co-parent, you're working together, but then all of a sudden, your spouse might be the one that's supposed to pick that child up from school that day. Then all of a sudden the military says it's a no-go, and that spouse has to take that responsibility on. So, is it too much to ask to put on one person? It can be, because it's a different type of stress. So veterans and military spouses are often included under the same hiring initiatives, but in the business case, their skill set, strengths, and workplace preparedness may be different. Veterans have work experience, leadership, industry relevant certifications, but may be unable to translate it into civilian terms. They may be reluctant or lack the vocabulary or knowledge of the civilian workforce to highlight strengths, and they may lack civilian networks. They may desire different work than previously done in the military, as I said with my own example. When I always talk about this, I like to refer back to a hearing that, a congressional hearing with some of the generals and admirals. And I remember Elizabeth Warren, the senator from Massachusetts, who was questioning certain credentials and how the credentials of the military members can't translate over. And I think we've gotten better with that over the last few years, but that's something that that we really should look at as members of the employment, because when it comes to that, we might be looking for a certain credential, but what we don't have in our mindset is that they've had that credential, but it's under a different name. It's done by the military. And in some cases, the training that they received with their credential could actually be more in-depth and focused than some of these other outside of the military credentials. I'm not saying all of them are, but there could be multiple facets of that. And it's important for members of the business sector to really understand what we're doing. Especially as owners of human resources professionals, those are two areas within a company not to slack on, is your leadership and your human resources, because of the importance of understanding the assets that face the facets that face your business. So when it comes to military spouses, they could be highly educated, but again, referring back to those resume gaps, the lack of experience because of the moves, and there could be stereotypes that relate to them just being based on the fact that they are a military spouse. For instance, if you're hiring a military spouse, one of the things that might have popped in your head is, oh, in a few years, will they still be here? We look for longevity in our companies, but sometimes, what can we do as employers to really make an impact for a quality employee. All right, now that we have talked about some of the challenges veterans and military spouses face in regard to employment, it's easy to see why a business might want to try to help. But the reality is that the hiring efforts need to be tied to the goals of the business, and that's what we want to spend some time on, talking about the business case for hiring veterans and military spouses. All right, so let's think about why veterans or military spouses would want to work for your business. So veterans and military spouses rely heavily on what their peers say about your company and what they read on the internet. Manage your online reputation actively and consistently through social media and sites like Instagram, Indeed, Yelp, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Your greatest brand ambassadors are veterans employed by you who can speak favorably about your experiences. Now we'll consider why you want to hire veterans and military spouses. First, veterans are skills proven under the toughest environments. Veterans will get behind a purpose when there's a sense of purpose. Leaders can optimize veterans' talents because they operate from the us before me mental model. They add value to organizational performance because veterans garner early equity among peers, management, and cross-functional teams. Likewise, military spouses have shown they are adaptable, educated, and can persevere. There can also be tangible reasons why organizations want to hire veterans, like work opportunity tax credits, as well as some programs within the Department of Labor alone. In general, organizations say that their reasons for hiring military affiliated employees are because it's good for business. So, what is the case for hiring veterans or military spouses? Before we answer that question, let's talk about what the business case is. A business case captures the reasoning behind a certain project or task and how it relates to the organization's overall goals. Having a business case for military affiliated hiring is important because it explains how it benefits the business, what resources will be used, the buy-ins, the positions, the roles, the initiatives. And so take a minute to think about what the business case for your military affiliated hiring is for your organization. So even though you're able to construct your own business case example, sometimes it's helpful to see an example. So take a minute to read the example we've included here and see if it compares to your own. And then think about, is there anything you'd like to change? So I'll give you guys a second to read that, and I'll just take me a little drink and we get back started. All right. So throughout this module, you see examples of companies who have successfully implemented veteran and military spouses initiatives. I know for my own company, I have created a veteran hiring and military spouse hiring program based on the Veterans at Work initiative, as well as my knowledge of being a SHRM ambassador. And that initiative is about 30 pages long of things that we will do and that we do for our veteran and military spouses. And some of the items are something that isn't even costing us any money, as it is just simply giving veterans a chance to get together and just talk. So now that you've learned about the veterans and the military spouses and what they bring to the workforce, now it's time to think about the business case. Let's think about how to implement a military hiring program by taking a look at the at the employee life cycle. So the employee life cycle is the employer readiness, the talent acquisition, the talent onboarding, the talent development, and the talent mobility. It is worth noting that these are some processes you would use for any employee. You could probably do many of the same things you have done, and this will help you kind of understand the uniqueness of veterans and their military spouses. So before we move forward, here are a few questions you can ask yourself. Who in my organization supports hiring initiatives? What does my organization have in place that could be applied to veteran employees? When will my organization be ready to deploy these initiatives? And where will I find qualified job candidates? And how will we support our military affiliated hires within the organization? And as I said, it can be as simple as just having a time to let veterans in a month get together and just have some coffee and donuts. So now that we've answered two questions, why do we want to hire a veteran and why would veterans want to work for your business, we'll discuss the alignment, okay? So the alignment is the synergy of the workforce readiness. So a veteran, do my current military skills match the needs of the role? Is the role my preferred career field? Am I leveraging preferential hiring policies if they're available? And then as the employer, do we as a business have a working knowledge of military skills? Does our workforce development support veterans? Do we currently have or can we implement any other workplace supports to ensure success for both veterans and non-veteran hires? And if you can answer yes to these questions, you're on your way for that workforce readiness alignment. You know, and I really like this, the gear for the, is your job in a preferred career field? I think it really is something that can be put out there and can give a nice outlook on when you hire veterans. So one reason we discussed the business case for your military hiring program is because it is essential that your workplace is prepared. You have looked at why and how you will hire veterans, but if you looked at whether your workplace itself is prepared, we often look at whether employees are ready to enter the workplace, but sometimes we forget to look at certain whether our workplace is prepared for certain types of employees. And there are several things that are paramount to the success of that. So understand the veteran population is a unique component of the broader workforce. Your investment in these elements set the foundation to deliver huge dividends in the success of your program. For example, your website should include elements to make it military branding effective. You know, one of the things that we're working on, even with Chateau Rouge, is literally a military hiring landing page. And you know, we've recently implemented that, but we're working on continuing to develop it to really make it stand out for military veterans and their spouses. So this is an employee readiness case study from Coca-Cola. So take a moment to see how Coca-Cola implemented their employee readiness efforts. Note that the opportunity to become an American corporate partner mentor is open to all Coca-Cola employees, veterans and civilians alike. Though he has never served in the military, William Smith, Director of Leadership Communications for Coca-Cola North America, became an ACP mentor to honor friends and family who have served, as well as to learn from the life experience of the veterans. So typically, if you're looking to hire people for long-term positions, you should aim for talent acquisition so as to lower potentially high turnover rates, which is a possible effect of recruiting less qualified candidates. Talent acquisition takes more time up front, but will ultimately help you build the best possible team for your company. Any good strategy always has a process model or cycle. So if we look at this, it says transition, transform your hiring needs from an as needed to be more proactive, develop military candidate, connected candidate pipelines, create diversity through targeted recruiting, and employ people who have the ability to grow. And when we say that have the ability to grow, is we need to look past the short-sightedness of, oh, well, how long did they spend at their last place? And more so, what skills can they bring to the table that will work with our company and continue to build us as well as themselves. So these 5 steps are intended to work in concert with each other. Predictive analytics is what makes talent acquisition the predictive step in your employee life cycle. The great thing about analytics is they show what can happen and explain the drivers in an outcome. So we'll spend some time unpacking and understanding the impact of relationships, building interview styles, and interview techniques. So to ensure the most effective interviews with the individuals who have served in the military, their spouses, hiring managers should be trained. ONET is a source for hiring managers and HR to learn about military occupational codes. These codes can relate over to your own job requirements and list of duties. So these styles provide the best opportunities for the interviewer to engage applicants in conversations that invite them to shift out of the military's polite and respectful mode, which may involve applicants giving short responses. So be clear when defining the necessary competencies and skills for each role in your sourcing. Keep in mind a competency is the ability to do something successfully, while a skill is a learned activity. You know, a skill is how, while the competency is what. And we see that a lot of times in the military, just as we talked about earlier with language. So military spouse candidates may have difficulty determining they are a good fit for a position through their resume alone. Their resume may show gaps, be functional instead of chronological, show short durations. So we recommend you take these factors into account when reviewing military spouse resumes and consider high-touch approaches such as behavioral or situational interviewing, connecting with references, and allowing opportunities for spouse to self-identify if they wish to. So these are some of the examples, and then HR can use touch approaches such as behavioral and situation interview skills, ask candidates to talk about the experience that qualify them for the job. So nothing is better than seeing with your own eyes when you host a hiring fair at your location. Veterans can experience your culture and the people who work there in real time. As well, a simple email, text, call to ensure them you have received their resume can go a long way. And this even goes beyond, like I said, a lot of these skills kind of match over. You know, just the fact of allowing someone to know that you've seen their resume, or also that you do not wish to move forward with them, is very good, because it allows people to kind of relax and keep moving on, and to ensure that they've done the right thing. If it's not been received to the right person, that's never a good sight. So I'm just going to skip past this case study here. So refer to the list in your module for some additional best practices for veterans and military spouse talent acquisition. Again, one of the biggest ones, hire based on skill sets rather than specific specialty areas. Something that was brought up before is like project management. It might not be project management. It might be worded something else. So talk about that skill set, those abilities and what you do to perform your job versus a specific specialty area. Utilize mentorship and peer monitoring is very important. So we've included a few tips on how you can source veteran and military spouse candidates. Be sure to review these tips because they're very important, especially if you're dealing with the EEO side of like federal contracting. Social media, LinkedIn, those are very important with military members, as most of them aren't living where they're from. So they use those on a regular basis just to communicate with their family. So utilizing those, going and having a conversation with the bases, most bases have a USO, or they have like a fleet family support center that kind of works with things like this. So don't be afraid to reach out to the base closest to you. And one of the biggest things that, military members aren't afraid to do as well is they're not really afraid to commute. So if you're an hour from your base and someone's transitioning out but wanting to stay in the area, they might be willing to commute that hour. So don't be afraid just because the base is a little far out that you would not get any candidates from that. The more energy you can put into it in hiring is the more energy and outcome that you could receive. So we'll talk about onboarding, and this is where the employee value proposition comes to life. So onboarding is a comprehensive process involving management and other employees that start the first minute that your new employee walks through the door, and it can last 12 months. I've even seen it kind of last a little bit longer than that, depending on the depth of your business. And new employees have more opportunities to be coached and exchange information. And think about it like your kid going to school, right? When your kids enter a new grade, their minds are going to be molded different than you ever thought they would be. And that's the same thing when a new employee comes in, especially a veteran. Their minds are going to be molded to the climate that they see or that's brought forth to them. So acclimate, this is where you lay out your expectations. Engage, this is the effective onboarding that increases retention, employee performance, product and quality, and customer ratings. And then retain. No one likes to lose talent, especially if you've paid into employee benefits for them from your own company's pocket. It makes it difficult because that was an investment. So companies who experience the loss of talent within the first 12 months of employment can expect to absorb cost up to 9 months of an employee's salary to identify and onboard a new replacement. So, of course, many of the onboarding practices you use for all employees will remain the same for military affiliated or not. A welcome letter should include the date and time to come to the office, directions, where to park, type of ID, building number, etc. Really give those details. And building a 90-day plan is an excellent way to become familiar with your colleagues, leaders, and the company's culture. So we've included some of the best practices. For example, veterans may not be familiar with various business attire. Providing them with advance notice on what type of attire to wear allows them to acquire the appropriate wardrobe. You got to really think, these people have been for the last 4 to 20 to 30 years have been in a uniform that's been required of them by the military. So when they think business, they think suit and tie. But that might not be what you're expecting if you are a brewery. You might be looking for someone who can walk around with you and get down and dirty even on their interview. So veterans can leverage a career counselor to gain work-life integration. Career counseling is an effective resource and can use the transition from their military service to new civilian careers. So now we'll talk about talent development. In many cases, talent development can be considered the heaviest lift of the employee life cycle. On any given day, your talent pools need expectations and timelines will vary. Our goal is high performance, sustainable organization, obtain strategic and operational goals, and meet objectives. That's our goal of the company. But we have to do our parts as employers to make sure our employees understand that. Right? Our goal is talent buy-in. Right? So you'll need to consider how talent ties to your strategic goals and determine the resources you're going to use for internal talent development. When thinking about diversity, be sure to include items such as wounded warriors, caregivers, as well as military spouses, if your budget permits. Outsource individuals or teams with experience that can help drive projects to success as you develop your long-term staff. Accountability for diversity and inclusion is key to making sure your targets are met. Continue to assess your team against your goals. So challenges to effective integrate talent management efforts are conflicting priorities, limited resources, non-supportive cultures, incompatible organizational process, senior leaders who undervalue integrated talent management. These are some of the biggest things we see across the industries because there are so many things where the old saying, if it's not broke, don't fix it. But sometimes it's not necessarily if it's not broke, don't fix it. But if it's something that's copper, eventually it will start to turn green. So cleaning it up occasionally is not a bad idea if you want it to look good. So veterans frequently report a lack of understanding related to workplace norms and customs, organizational report structures, and benchmarks for performance evaluation and recognitions. Veterans are accustomed to frequent and specific performance feedback and will likely be receptive to it. It helps to reassure the veteran that they are on the right track. They're coming from an environment of constant feedback. And constant feedback does not necessarily mean micromanaging. Constant feedback is saying, hey, let's try this next time. Let's do this. What went wrong? What did you like? Sometimes it's just allowing them to verbally express what's going on in their mind and bouncing it off of someone. And that doesn't always mean it has to be a manager. Sometimes that could be peer-to-peer feedback. So program allows participants to have near-term impact on the business. The current program is focused on military officers, and the acceptability of the module to prior enlisted employees is clear. The value is rotational training program about professional development, correlates directly to the quality and availability of mentors supporting the initiative. So stage 5, talent mobility. The final step is talent mobility, and the successful talent mobility programs affect all aspects of a business, such as operations, finance, and your human capital. It is important to talk with your veterans and military spouse employees and understand their expectations for mobility. The benefits are shorter time productivity, lower talent acquisition costs, limited competitive intelligence leakage, and better financial performance. So prime opportunity to apply employee skills where they best suit the employee and the business. High potentials have the ability, aspirations to grow in the company, values align with the business, and commitment to rise and succeed in the critical positions. Provide transition training tools, but also hold employees accountable for their own development. Two of the things that I really enjoy about this 7-step or 7 key parts of talent mobility are clear goals, being transparent, and make it a part of your culture, right? A lot of times we see issues with management not wanting to change the way that they operate, and that's really what prevents the business from succeeding as well as it could, because sometimes what worked 2 years ago prior to the pandemic won't work now. And we've learned that. And we've learned that there are things that maybe we needed to put in place in risk management, but that was never thought of, because again, back to the, if it's not broken, do not fix it. But there's always time to develop and change and make sure that we're up to date on our practices. And I believe that a lot of you are doing that, and that is why you're here today. So best practices for all, right, is 85% employees consider themselves disengaged. Using best practices for talent mobility are great ways to increase employee engagement. You know, employees dedicate 20% of their time to side projects or testing waters with different roles, which is very important because if we can have an employee cross-train and get a better skill set out of them and make them more widely used across our company, that's better for us. So we've all heard of the ROI. In this instance, I want you to think of ROM, return on mobility, right? So return on investment, we're talking about return on mobility. So it's a twofold plan. You have the opportunity to leverage existing veteran employees in a mentorship role. You can drive home the employee value proposition. And you can have representatives of your business. They may already be a member of the LWIB. Find your local one-stop to develop collaborations for training and employment. And the LWIB is that Labor Workforce Investment Board. Career one-stop centers, sometimes they're still referred to as American Job Centers. They're a very big part of the DOL's program initiatives. I think a lot of times we associate them with programs where it's for at-risk youth, but they're not just for at-risk youth, they're for everyone. So I'm going to skip this case study and talk about the stage 5 of talent mobility. So talent mobility strategies can help veterans acclimate to the civilian workforce. Having conversations with veterans and military spouses early on can help them manage their career progression and understand the workforce expectations such as promotion process, how to succeed, what resources are available to them. Keep in mind, because they are new to the civilian workforce, they might be unfamiliar with many of the resources that are often provided outside the military. This includes ADA, FMLA, and some of the items of that nature. But also is something to really think here is, you know, veterans, you know, as I said, some of them spend 25 years in the military. So if they've spent 25 years in the military, you know, and they're only 35 when they retire, you know, you're looking at a lifetime with this employee within your company. You're looking at another 20 years. You could have that employee with your company specifically if you do the right things and work as a team with them to understand them as a veteran. So several of you may have already have a veteran or military spouse hiring employment program, while others may be at the beginning stages. A great way to check the visibility of your program is by going through each stage of the employment life cycle and asking yourself the corresponding questions. Oh, shoot, sorry about that. And then you can review your current employee life cycle to ensure you're maximizing the opportunities. As you already know, the SHRM Foundation has developed the Veteran Employment Digital Toolkit. We understand building a veteran employment program is a heavy lift. That's why SHRM has curated the toolkit, and you can access it free, high quality resources to support the development of a veteran employment program. They've also created the Veteran at Work certificate. It's free. It's a multifaceted program. I went through it myself. It was a lot to take in, but it was really worth it. And even as a veteran and someone who's married to a military member, I have definitely learned a lot more than I realized, and some of the things that I saw kind of click together through the data that they've pulled. So I want to thank you for taking the time to learn about the SHRM Veterans Foundation Employment Initiative, and we now look to you to turn this very important initiative into an effective and permanent program. And you know, within this, we have over, I think it was 58 resources that went into putting this together. But that is the end of my presentation. I thank you for your time. Is there any questions?
Sterling, thank you so much. I'm going to turn it over to Joni Green, my colleague at Better Business Bureau. Joni, where would you like people to put their questions? In the chat or the Q&A?
In the Q&A. I do have a question. What would be the best way to get in front of vets and military spouses with our job openings? Are there certain keywords that you should use, or certain publications you should put them in, websites? What would be the best way to put yourself in front of them when you have a job opening?
So my biggest suggestion is work with the resources that are already provided to these military members on the bases close to them. Mm-hmm. Also, I don't think it's a bad choice to have kind of a veteran kind of open house so that they can kind of come and see the position, sit down for an interview right there, and get an opportunity to kind of see your workforce. You know, if you're near a base, utilize the USO, utilize programs like the Navy has the MWR program, you know, and, you know, be visible, even outside of just hiring practices, be visible to active duty members and the veteran community. Because a lot of times the veterans who are looking for those jobs are still supporting those on the base. They still go to events, and then they change from being the ones that are helping set up and being part of it to being the volunteers that are giving out the t-shirts or the food.
Great, thank you. I don't see any other questions. I did have a couple come up, but you answered them beautifully during your presentation. So.
Okay, thanks, Joni. We want to let the attendees know that you will be receiving a recording of this Building Better Business webinar and the presentation as well from Sterling in your follow-up email. And it will also be posted on Better Business Bureau's YouTube channel. And speaking of YouTube, wanted to let you know our next webinar scheduled for next Tuesday, March 15th, will actually focus on YouTube and how to grow your business. It's a Grow with Google webinar. We're going to talk about why you should set up a YouTube channel, how to set one up, why it's important and what's important to fill out when you're uploading video, and also making good creative and how to target and measure your results. So make sure to sign up for that. Again, it's a Grow with Google webinar, and you can learn more about it at bbb.org/CT. Otherwise, Sterling, again, thank you so much for joining us today, and thank all of you for joining us for this important webinar. Have a great afternoon.